Bioshock is one of my favorite video game franchises of all time, and I could say it's probably my favorite shooter game. It combines both incredible gameplay and storytelling together, whilst being in one of the most creative environments I've seen in a game. All three of the Bioshock entries are fantastic, but here's the thing, I just want more. Is it possible that we are going to see another Bioshock game? Let's discuss and look at the evidence that we have. So for those of you who don't know, Irrational Games, who were the creative minds and developers behind both Bioshock 1 and Bioshock Infinite, ended up closing down the Irrational Games studios to say farewell to Bioshock back in 2014, shortly after the DLC cycle of Bioshock Infinite. Now, this was extremely sad, as fans of the series, of course, were sort of sitting there saying, oh, is this it? All three of these games have been utterly fantastic, and it's kind of a shame to see that it's just going to be, getting chucked into the gutter. Now, if you're wondering about Bioshock 2, Bioshock 2 is actually developed by 2K Marin, so Irrational Games really had nothing to do with that game, but I suppose you can see the difference between Bioshock 1 and Infinite when you compare it to number 2. The creativity wasn't as kind of fluid in Bioshock 2 in comparison to the two other Bioshock games, and I think that's evidence of Irrational Games actually developing the first one, and of course Infinite. The creativity and storytelling in both the first game and Infinite were absolutely fantastic. And you have to admit, this comes straight out of the mind of Ken Levine. With that being said though, I had a blast going through Bioshock 2. It's probably not as good as the other two Bioshock games, but it was fantastic, and it definitely gives me hope that 2K Marin can of course make another Bioshock game with of course what they did with Bioshock 2. So here's the golden question. Now that Irrational Games has shut down for business saying farewell to Bioshock, does this mean that the Bioshock franchise is dead? Well, to answer that question, no. And in fact, it's actually very, very likely that another Bioshock game will emerge, possibly someday soon. The CEO of 2K Games actually has said some very, very important and interesting stuff about Bioshock and its continuation. This is what he had to say. It's a really important intellectual property for the company, and while I don't have any announcements to make, yes, it's a really important franchise for us. He also continued to say, we think Bioshock is important and certainly something we're focused on, something 2K Marin will be responsible for shepherding going forward. So that right there is really the best answers we have towards Bioshock's continuation, and I think this is pretty much as good as it's going to get, but it is good enough because this tells us right here that of course, Bioshock is still important to 2K, even though, of course, Irrational Games aren't here to take the spot to, of course, develop it and come up with the creative idea behind a new game. 2K Marin will now be responsible for making another new Bioshock game. Now, is this a good or bad thing? That's what it comes down to. Well, of course we know that 2K Marin were the developers and the creative minds behind Bioshock 2. Now, like I was mentioning at the start of the video, Bioshock 2 isn't really as good as number 1 or Infinite. You could see the creativity and the storytelling on both of Infinite and the first game. They were fantastic. Now, number 2, the story was a little bit kind of mediocre. It wasn't as good as the first and Infinite. The gameplay was still top-notch. It still felt like Bioshock, and that was good. The environments were absolutely fantastic. Seeing more of Rapture was just a blast. So I think, 2K Marin certainly did a very, very, very good job with Bioshock 2, and I do have faith in them to, of course, create and go forward with the Bioshock franchise, and I hope that's the case, I really do. There's of course another important question that rises up as well. If there were to be a new Bioshock game, exactly where would it be set? Now, we already know that Bioshock 1 and 2 takes place in the underwater city of Rapture, a city that's gone to, well, shit because of gene splicing. Then of course we have Bioshock Infinite that took the franchise in a different direction, taking place in a completely new environment altogether. This time, instead of a city under the water, we now have a city all the way up in the sky. Really, it's the complete opposite. A lot of people were actually worried about this because of the fact that Bioshock has always been used to being placed in the city of Rapture, this underwater, utopia, and of course Bioshock Infinite being a completely new, environment. A lot of people were kind of worried about that, and they were kind of thinking, this probably isn't going to be as good as, the first kind of 2 games? Well, of course, it ended up being that Bioshock Infinite is quite possibly one of the most critically acclaimed video games ever to become released, so it's kind of funny how things work. This is why I have faith in 2K Marin. I think it's very possible for them to go ahead and to make a brand new environment in the universe of Bioshock, whatever it may be. What I do hope is, I hope that creativity of this new environment that they might actually end up making is still there. You can just see the creativity behind Rapture and Columbia. Like, damn, the creative environments of Bioshock is one of the biggest aspects that hook me into the game. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on a new Bioshock game. I think it's very, very likely that we will see a new Bioshock game sometime in the near future. Now, while we're on the topic of Bioshock, let's talk about the Bioshock Collection. Now, as you guys should probably know, in this current generation that we're in for gaming and whatnot, you guys will obviously know that definitive editions and kind of editions of games where they get re-released on PS4 and Xbox One with all DLC and slightly better graphics are a very common occurrence. And it's kind of confused me as to why this treatment hasn't been given to Bioshock thus far, with Bioshock being one of the most critically acclaimed video game franchises of the last generation. Well, it looks like the Bioshock Collection is probably going to end up being an actual thing, which is just fantastic, because I would love to hold a physical copy that contains, of course, Bioshock 1, 2, and Infinite, with all the DLC for all of the games. Now, it looks like it's actually going to happen because of the fact that a Brazilian ratings board has actually listed the Bioshock Collection, as you guys can see right here. Bioshock the Collection, and we have producer 2K Games, availability 2016. Now, what's interesting about this is you can see that it is actually labeled for PC, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 4, and of course, Xbox One. Now, definitive editions and stuff usually get re-released on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, sometimes PC, although it's a little confusing as to why you would re-release a definitive edition for PC when PC, already have the definitive edition with being able to increase or decrease graphics anyway. I suppose you could say that the collections and definitive editions for PC, kind of you're going to get it at a cheaper price with, of course, all the DLC thrown in there. But it confuses me a lot as to why there is going to be a Bioshock Collection for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. That ultimately does confuse me, but hey, for the people who are still, of course, gaming on PS3 and Xbox 360, I suppose that's really, really cool. But my idea of this Bioshock Collection is it most likely will contain number 1, 2, and Infinite, and of course all DLCs included. For the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One version, it's most likely going to include better visuals in comparison to what the visuals were on the last generation for 360 and PS3. I would say don't really expect any kind of updated visuals and increased visuals and graphics for the PS3 and Xbox 360 version, if of course what this Brazilian ratings board is saying is correct. But yeah, going back to it, it's really just going to contain all 3 games, and I would say DLC, because that's usually a common occurrence. So yeah, that's very interesting. But with that all being said, that doesn't mean that this is absolutely 100% confirmed. And I'd say that we are going to most likely find out whether the Bioshock Collection is going to be a real thing E3 this year, which I cannot wait. Now, one idea that kind of popped to my mind is perhaps maybe if 2K Games sort of do have an E3 lineup for this year, I think a perfect way of building hype for Bioshock would be to, first of all, announce the Bioshock Collection, and straight after that, announce a brand new Bioshock game. Of course, that is me being extremely hopeful, but you see, this is something that Bethesda did last year with Dishonored. At first, the Dishonored Collection was announced, the definitive collection that would of course include all DLC and whatnot for Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Shortly after that, Dishonored 2 came out of freaking nowhere. Now I know Bethesda, 2K Games, they most likely do their things differently, but it would be super cool if we had a scenario that ended up happening exactly like that. Otherwise, guys, that's all for today. I know this is different from what I usually cover on my channel, but I am looking at kind of expanding here on my channel, and Bioshock is a game that I just cherish with all my heart. I love being able to talk about it. So hopefully you guys don't mind, and I'm hoping that I do actually, kind of have some Bioshock fans here on the channel. But anyway, guys, that's all for today. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later. Peace.